the name of our show.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Large Glass. I'm Todd.
I'm Terri.
How you doing tonight? It's good to see all of you. We've got a really exciting night for you tonight, so I know I'm thrilled.
Yeah, so am I.
Yeah.
So this will be good.
So let's see. There's Splunk 16. Hey, good to see you. I guess we'll start off with the obvious because we open our drinks.
Yeah.
And I wanted to tell you that I just had my second COVID shot 24 hours ago. So I'm not drinking tonight because I don't want to wind up face down on the desk.
Well, he's drinking, but he's drinking electrolytes.
Yes,
so,
I'm drinking electrolytes, so that's good for me.
Yeah.
But why don't we show them what you're drinking
Sure.
and what I would have been drinking?
Sure. Well, we have paired it once again with the artist. This artist lives in two separate places right now. She lives in Texas and Brooklyn part-time. So in New Jersey, where we're from, it's easier to find something from Brooklyn. So that's what I did today.
Okay.
So we are drinking Coney Island.
Coney Island beer, and you have the mermaid.
I do.
And I have the merman.
So that's what I'm drinking. He's going to drink his
I have
hydrating
the water.
fluid.
All right, so
Yes.
enough of that. But do you have enough? Can I pour for you like I always do?
Yeah, we can do that.
All right.
I pre-gamed a little bit.
Carolyn
before
Thau
we
is
do.
here. Hi, Carolyn.
Hey,
Ben is
Carolyn.
here. Amanda Toolin is here. Good to see all of you guys. Thanks for coming.
We're also on a different camera, which is kind of confusing me a little bit. I kind of keep looking at this one, and we're on that one
We are
tonight.
here.
So we're here.
Here.
All right.
All right, good.
Okay.
Good. All right, I'm going to put that tempting beer away.
Okay.
There's
wanna...
Memory Vessel.
Memory
Mare
Vessel.
Peeps. Yeah, Mare Peeps.
Yeah.
Well, here.
Here. Cheers.
Cheers. This is episode 34.
Four,
Yeah,
yes.
episode 34. I feel weird drinking this.
Yep. Me too.
Cheers. That is just not right.
This is actually very good.
Don't tell me that.
Really good.
Don't tell me that.
Nice, light, refreshing.
Okay, you can stop
Little
now.
citrus around the edges. Really good.
I've never heard.
You know, tomorrow's supposed to be a beautiful day. This is the perfect beer for a beautiful day.
I'm leaving.
Okay.
Okay, where should
Okay.
we start? Should we start with a little art news because we got some
let's
events
start
coming up?
some art news.
Jump right into those?
Sure.
All right, so we're gonna do some news and let's open up some stuff here. So, not a whole lot to talk about tonight in terms of the news, except for one big thing, and that is the 100 in Art Tour, which we've been talking about for weeks. We've been plugging this thing, and it is here. It is coming up this Friday. It starts this Friday, and we are going to be kicking off that 100 in Art Tour with a reception at the 100 in Art Museum. Now, Terri and I will be live at the museum broadcasting from there, and we're really excited for the event that night. You're going to get to meet all the artists on the tour. We're going to be interviewing a few artists live. The museum will mostly be empty, but you'll get to kind of pick. If you're going to go out on this tour, you kind of get to see the work because it's all hung in the museum. Well, one work from every artist is hung there. So you'll get to kind of pick and choose who you want to go see the following day. Then on Saturday and Sunday, we are live in the field. On Saturday, we are at Whittemore in Tewksbury. We're going to be seeing the unveiling of a new public sculpture there. And then on Sunday, we are in Frenchtown at Maker's Alley. Those times are approximately 11 to 1:30 on both days. So join us, please join us. Come along for that. I think that's going to be fantastic. There's the beautiful 100 in Art Museum. I mean, it's gorgeous in Clinton, New Jersey, right on that waterfall. So, you know, maybe I'll get a camera out there so you can see that.
Yeah.
But so that's what's going on. Please join us for that, and we'll see you there. All right. So hold on a second. I just botched that. Let's go to birthdays, shall we?
Birthdays.
You want to do them?
My favorite.
Wait.
I never know the order that they come up in, though, so I'm always kind of looking at the screen to get a little hint.
Well,
Oh,
it's your guy first.
I love
because
this
it's
guy.
today. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, you go ahead.
So I grew up with his drawings. This is a very famous children's author, illustrator. You might know him from creating the Madeline series, Ludwig Bemelmans. And he was born on this day back in 1898. not too long ago, the New York Historical Society had a show with all of his original work, like a lot of his original pieces, and they're gorgeous. He paints in oils. They hang all over New York City. They're in private collections. He actually also illustrates for adults as well. So he's kind of created this whole pop culture
around that kind of style.
Around that kind of style.
Yeah.
And we all know him and love him and grew up with him, and his poetry is in our heads as well as his illustrations. So happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Ludwig. All right, so Carolyn's here. So we've got a French artist next. And I went and looked up the pronunciation
Thank goodness.
of this guy's name. Because this one's a stumper. Uga Merle.
Oh,
Uga.
that's not how I would have pronounced
That's
it.
not how anyone would have pronounced it.
Huh?
Uga.
I was thinking
Uga Merle.
Hughes Merle.
Well, he really, makes these beautiful, sort of romantic,
Gorgeous
what's the word I'm looking for? Nostalgic kind
Very
of inspiration.
sentimental
paintings.
Romantic.
Yeah. So,
He was born on April 28th back in 1822.
so he's tomorrow.
Yep, he's tomorrow.
Okay. And next?
Also tomorrow, you might remember him from one of our earlier episodes.
Yep.
He was featured in episode 17 of The
you remember that?
Largeglass. Yes.
So 17 episodes. He was halfway to where we are now.
Yes, and this is William Kentridge.
Okay.
South African artist. He specializes in prints, drawings, animated films. You might remember him from drawing in very malleable charcoal and erasing and then animating that. He is also born on April 28th in 1955, so happy birthday.
Okay. And then last but not least, we have George Innes.
Very famous as well. He was born on May 1st back in 1825. You might recognize a lot of his scenes. He was in the Hudson River School.
Yeah. Gorgeous paintings.
Beautiful American pastoral scenes, American Impressionism. He's one of our old masters and an American treasure.
Yeah.
So happy birthday to him as well.
There's a lot of stuff going on in the chat right now that I kind of want to, just kind of run through, but particularly Memory Vessel's reference to the Ooga Chaka song, which she should be banned for that, because I'm never getting that out of my head now. Thanks.
Yes, and Carolyn.
What did Carolyn say?
She said, love those books. So she must be referring to the Madeline books.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And are now Alex's favorite when she was younger. Yeah.
So that's going to wrap it up for birthdays tonight. Okay, so last but not least, before we actually start to get on to our artist this evening, we wanted to let you know that we are now finally on Patreon, which I'm really excited about. I mean, I know that there are so many of you out there that are subscribing to us on Twitch, and that continue. And if that's your preferred method of supporting us, then by all means, have at it. But we also have Patreon now, which we feel is a little bit broader. It goes beyond Twitch. It goes to all the other different platforms. And it's a way for you to support our show and the other projects that we're doing. Now, if you're a Patreon supporter for us, you actually unlock some exclusive content. I just uploaded a blooper reel from all the stuff I record before we go on. Terri never knows that we're actually on the air. Or not on the air, but I'm recording. So you can unlock some special stuff on there. Plus, you get access to our Discord community, which is like a big chat room that we monitor all the time. So, if you're popping messages into that chat once in a while, if it's not 3 o'clock in the morning, we're actually able to respond to that. So it brings the community a little bit closer together, which we really like. So consider that. If you hit the About tab down below this viewer, you can see the link to that Patreon page. But if you consider that, thank you. Otherwise, if you can't do that, tell a friend to watch the show. We would love that too. Okay. Wow, the chat is active.
Yeah.
Carolyn Thou's like, bonjour.
Yes.
Just Hughes. Don't pronounce the ES. Okay.
Oh.
I thought it was Ooga. So, all right. So we're on from that.
Okay.
So let's see. Tonight we have got a very exciting show to bring you. As you've known in the past, we have partnered with the Brownstone Art Gallery in Brooklyn, New York, and we are excited to be with them again tonight for a new show that they have called Far Afield, featuring the paintings of Michelle Mackey. And so I'm very excited to welcome her. But before we do that, we would love to, if I can find the right window, because this is always where I get tripped up, right? But we would love to introduce our friends at the Brownstone, and I'm going to take a second to do that. So first and foremost, the curator of Far Afield with Michelle Mackey is Josh Vogelin, and I've got to find him here. That's Taylor on the screen. Hi, Taylor. Taylor's part of the Brownstone Art, so I'm just going to introduce them as they pop up on the screen. So first, Taylor Backus, who is key at the Brownstone Art and has helped me on so many different things when I need assistance running these shows. So thank you, Taylor. There's Josh Vogelin, who unfortunately does not have a camera tonight, but he curated the show. Josh, do you want to say hi so your big J can pop forward on the screen?
Yeah.
There
hey guys, how is everyone?
The J is Josh Vogelin curating the show. Josh, I have a question for you in a little while when we start to talk to Michelle, so if you could stay tuned for that.
Yeah, he's an avatar tonight.
He's an avatar tonight.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's David Backus, who is also with us tonight. David, you want to say hello?
Hello, everybody.
There
and
we
I just
go.
want to say thank you very much for the collaboration. It's great to be, this is our second time collaborating, but our first time on the large glass.
Well,
So great to be with you.
And thank you.
Very excited to have Michelle have a chance here to talk about her art.
Yeah, we really appreciate it too. We love having you here. And having this opportunity to talk to such a fantastic painter in her studio is just brilliant. So thank you for that. Okay. Well, we could, let's see, we should probably have some kind of cover image up here that just, says what we're up to. And of course, this show, Far Afield at the Brownstone Art, you can get to that by going to theBrownstoneArt.com. And you can see the show firsthand there. You can enter the gallery enter the exhibit and the gallery right on the webpage. And you can also follow them on Instagram at TheBrownstoneArt. So definitely check them out. So we could probably pop right into this, right?
Yes.
We could get going on this?
Yes.
All right, let's see if we can find our first
That's our first
image. And should we bring Michelle Mackey in? Michelle, can we introduce you?
Yeah, let's go ahead and introduce her.
Yeah, you want to do it?
Yeah, sure. Well, what we're seeing on the screen is one of her images called Akimbo. So tonight we are beyond thrilled to have an exceptional artist with us. Her name is Mackey. Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
I heard you pause.
No,
I
it
was
wasn't
like,
me.
Ooh, what's going on?
I didn't do anything.
So she has a show called Far Afield at the Brownstone Art, as Todd said. She spends part of her time in Texas as well as Brooklyn, New York.
Mm-hmm.
She deals with a lot of themes with time and geology.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you a little bit about her. Her education, she's got an MFA from Pratt right there in Brooklyn. And she has solo exhibitions internationally as well as nationally, as well as some participation in some group exhibits. So I want to get right into the
right into the meat of it.
And then there's one other thing I do want to say. If you think of any questions for Michelle,
yes.
We're going to tell you to start thinking about them now, because sometimes there's a little bit of a delay with the chat. So if you think of them, type them in the chat.
Right. Also, we will have a Q&A at the end of this, so you'll have an opportunity to ask Michelle questions. We will read them to her. She'll be able to, she won't be able to see them, but we'll be able to read them to her, and then she can respond, and you'll actually see that on the show. But like Terri said, there's a delay, so we'll do the best we can with that delay. So Michelle, hi.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good. How are y'all?
Good. We're honored to have you here, and really excited to talk to you about your work.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be here. I love your show, and you gave me a shout out last week that was really just so spot on with your reading of the work. So.
Oh, thank you. Well, good. So we're all on the same page. I guess we should. I really, I'm curious to ask.
Well, the first thing I'm going to ask, Michelle, what studio are you in right now? Because you work both in Brooklyn and Texas. And we did watch some of the videos of you working in your studio. So it's really interesting because you have two environments to concentrate in. Where are you at right now?
I am in Dallas, Texas right now. So that's the studio that you're seeing me in.
Okay, gotcha. And yeah, I imagine space is probably an easier commodity to come by in Dallas than it is in Brooklyn. I'm assuming. I could be wrong.
Because everything's bigger in Texas.
Right.
That's right. Yes, and everything's nice and compact in Brooklyn and in New York. But I will say, so I've been splitting my time for the last decade between Dallas and Brooklyn, but I did actually move out of my space in Brooklyn a few months back. So
So
so I'm
that's
fully
gone
I'm
now.
full time here.
Ah,
It's yeah.
Okay.
okay, cool. So
That's a recent event.
and
Yeah.
I would imagine that given the subject matter in your paintings, you probably don't miss Brooklyn as much as someone else might. I don't know. I mean, I would feel like given what you paint, it's probably difficult to do that in the landscape of Brooklyn.
It seems like my work has moved from like in the last 2 years, it's gone into more and more expansive, kind of horizontal landscape versus prior it used to be more architecturally inspired. So, I had these more vertical kind of
Ah,
shadowy interior spaces. And then, just as the work and the process kind of dictates where I was going, it's like I started spreading out.
gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Can we get Josh to jump in real quick? I'm curious, Josh Vogelin, who's the curator of the show. I was curious just to have him say a few words about what he was thinking about when he curated the show, maybe a little bit about the work and what inspired him to actually put this show together. Can we jump over to him for a second just to kind of start us off with that thought?
Yeah, sure. So David and I had originally seen Michelle's work in the Brooklyn studio over a year ago. And I think at that time, it just jumped out at us like how much these pieces moved beyond the canvas. And we could kind of immediately envision them in the brownstone space. So then, when Michelle had this full body to show us, like originally it was, let's see what's there. And almost immediately the decision was this all would come to life in the brownstone. So we could see the way the canvases could take this, the architectural space and make it so alive and so free, full of light. It was just really like such an honor to work on this one.
Yeah, and you can totally see that in the way this show is hung and the way the various pieces are juxtaposed or hung, or at least ordered in this case. It really does bring that space to life. Cool. So Michelle, we're going to kind of go through the show piece by piece, right? In the order that it's available on the same order that you'd see it on the website. And maybe just, we have some questions for you, obviously, but we also kind of, as we go through things, if you see something that you want to point out, or, I want you to really be, the one that's kind of running the show here. Okay. So we have Akimbo up first. I'm not sure if I don't think you're able to see what we have. So Akimbo is the first one that we actually have up on the screen. And I love this as a starting piece to the show.
It's glorious.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. So when we were watching some of your videos, some of your process, there's a lot going on with your process and your subject material because it kind of all shifts, converges, and diverges together, as well as when you're interacting with the medium and what you're painting on. One thing that struck me is you said that you work on multiple pieces at the same time. And we've talked to other artists in the past. I remember a couple shows back, we were speaking with one, and she had to focus on one piece at a time because she was very concerned that they would start looking similar. But yours don't do that. They kind of really take on their own life at the same time. Can you talk to us a little bit about that process? Do you sit down with the painting? Do you stare at it for a long time? Do you get right into it?
That's a good question. And I do stare for a long time for all of them. There's a lot of going back and just standing in front of it. And so when I work on multiple pieces at once, I'm definitely not here, making marks maybe at the same time like a dance or anything. But I do have multiple ones on the wall, to probably at least 3 at a time to be working on. And that might mean I'm only painting on one but staring at the other 2, because it's a little bit like there's this almost like almost like a little hopscotch happening, where if I take a chance on one, I learned something on that one that I can then apply to the next one. And then, so not that one is advancing past the other, it's just that there's these multiple conversations going on. And so it's almost like, and it's a safeguard for me to not kind of, maybe for me, it's the opposite of what the other artist was saying. Like, I also don't want to do the same thing. So for me, having multiple ones up helps me to not do the same thing. I think because I don't get so precious with each one.
Right, right. And plus you really have a diversity of size and even, the way you flipped some of them around and worked on the backs of them. So the way in which you employ a kind of diversity of practice to these things across the board, to me, is really kind of, I think, also interesting in the way that drives that. I wanted to point out there's a lot of people saying hi to you in the chat, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't miss them. So there's somebody that's calling themselves Lachlan is Cool, saying hi to you, Michelle. There's Yaboy Mike Lamar saying hi, and also says that you're the best artist of the modern era and you cannot convince them otherwise. So let's see, I want to make sure there's
Memory
Rumpelstiltskin tight jeans. Yay, Michelle. So there's a lot of activity going on right now. So you're definitely hot in the chat.
Yes.
So, that's great.
Yeah.
Hi back to everybody.
Yeah. So okay, so let's kind of move here, because I was really interested in talking about these. And so this first one that we have up is Stature. These two are paired together, I think, on the wall in the gallery. And the one that comes after this is also sort of right by it. But what really interested me in this one, in Stature, kind of plays across all the work that I've seen. And that is, you talk a little bit about negating space, activating space, and then also about time, but I want to push that aside for a second. In that kind of negated layering of space, this one really strikes me, because the sky overlaps the ground on some level. And so in a horizon, it's very difficult to do that, because I think our eyes are trained to kind of see sky as the distant part of this. But you've somehow created a space where that sky is jumping forward, and you've also even negated typical compositional elements of cool and warm, because typically the warmer color, like on the bottom of this, would come flying forward and the sky would recede. But somehow you managed to flip that, and I love that in this piece. It's a real like head spinner. Can you talk about that?
Thank you. Thanks for noticing all of these things, because that's what I'm trying to do with. I think, years ago I really considered myself an abstract painter, and I probably still do at my heart. And I'm just using the familiar language of landscape so that a viewer and myself can feel welcome to come in, and you already do have some expectations, and that's a way for me to say, wait, take a closer look. You don't know what you're seeing. And not because I am the author, but because I feel like none of us really know what's happening. There's so much mystery and, things that are beyond our control, that it's kind of like to walk into a space that you think, yeah, that's blue, that looks like sky, but then all of a sudden to kind of just push it enough to where it's something different. And you noticed this in the last episode as well. You were talking about the horizon, kind of rolling down, almost eating the rest of the painting.
Right.
And in Stature, that's exactly what's happening again, because of the flatter way I've painted that blue sky to where it becomes this whole shape, and then it pops forward, whereas the other parts are more granular. Because that's something else I like to subvert, is the sense of solid, the sense of solid ground being not so solid. So a lot of times you'll notice in the groundwork in some of these landscapes, they might be dissolving or seemingly swirling like they're water or something. So I want that kind of idea of what you're standing on might actually be more vaporous than the sky.
And that's totally evident in this one, right? As that orange ground sort of becomes this kind of liquid, whereas the sky has a flatness to it. It almost makes it look like a panel, which is really, really strange. There's a lot of people chatting. Christina McKinnon is here saying she adores your work. Mike Rader is here saying this is a beauty. Melanie Vogt, hi and congratulations, Michelle. Wonderful to hear you. And then let's see. Oh, Brian Carney is here. This piece is stunning. Poster 333 is saying they love your work. I like to really include the people in the chat here because it makes it so vibrant. So thanks to all of you. Ben Hagenbush says, I love how the orange and the blue complement each other. And yeah, that is the other part of this that furthers that weird kind of juxtaposition in these, that disorientation. So then on this one, which is boundary, something else is happening. Like it goes the other way.
Right.
It does. It's receding a little.
So something like this, now you kind of have a much more sort of a traditional approach to like a high horizon, right? There's a dimming of the light. There's an object in the center that is, a little bit strange. I love the way you're busting out of the frames on these, though. I really love this non-traditional use of the outside edge of this. It kind of becomes this inward kind of portal, this inward kind of space. Very strange to me, but I really like that.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been enjoying kind of digging into those frames and thinking of it as a boundary, but then also like portals is an idea in all of my work, so creating the edges within the edges. So to really be delving into these more structural edges has been kind of fun.
Yeah, definitely. And I can see that. Brian Carney, thanks for the sub. That's awesome. Appreciate that. There's Pumpkin Audrey saying the colors are wonderful. Chat's flying by. Let's keep going. This one is called Sudden Light. So you want to tell us a little bit about this one, because this one seems to sort of now really step away a little bit.
Okay, so Sudden Light, that one surprised me in the sense that sometimes the process, as I was describing it, more like a conversation, and it will lead me into, unexpected territory, so to speak. And this one, I was painting and doing multiple layers as I do work additive and subtractive. So I'll be sanding into it, painting into it. And a lot of times with these, I'm thinking of the surprise of the landscape. And that can happen physically when you're looking at a landscape and even a cityscape, and all of a sudden the buildings are lit up by the sunset color. Or, and you've been looking at these structures, but then, they're aglow. And that you need to be there looking at this right at that moment. It's important that you're right there. And that's kind of what happened in this Sudden Light painting, with the pretty high contrast of the blue and the more chartreuse yellow. Just had this feeling of a sudden light and almost more of an aerial perspective to me. So that scale seemed like I had pulled back and was seeing this dappled light on a ground. And then, yeah. And that's another one where I incorporated the frame, but I wanted it to sort of share the colors and be a little bit less visible as a frame, just kind of more of a, just more of this kind of structural boundary using the same color.
Yeah, because, typically the frame is supposed to not sort of interfere with the work, right? That's sort of, it's supposed to sort of do a job of isolating the work, but not overpowering the work. And so that kind of feels like you kind of went after that here a little bit. So I think you might have frozen right there for a second, Michelle. But I just wanted to say a couple of things. Texas Rhythm, thanks for that comment. I appreciate that. And, one last thing on this one before I move on to the next one, Michelle. I like that you're sanding into this and you're using additive and reductive, because the process itself then becomes like the erosion and the geology itself.
Yes, it's a lot like plate tectonics, emerging and converging and diverging, and your whole process is very similar to what I think you might be trying to represent. I always hesitate a little bit with abstract saying you're doing this, but you admitted to it. So I think your process is very similar to how you're working. And even on the previous image when we were looking at stature, because you do see, if you start thinking about it, it almost looks like that lava-esque
Right.
formation erupting. But then so that's happening, and the plates are shifting on that two-dimensional sense. But then it's almost like it turns on you, and then they're merging this way too.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, there's a lot of things going on both the vertical plane when it's facing you, but also on
Yeah.
the horizontal plane.
And that kind of goes, Michelle, that kind of goes to this whole thing you're talking about with slow time and geology, right? And can you talk a little bit about that for the audience? Because I love that aspect of your thinking when you're approaching this. Can you kind of talk a little bit?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a wonder that I kind of ended up getting more interested in geology in the last couple years, and that I didn't start out there because like you're pointing out, all of my vocabulary was lending itself towards this push and pull, this erosion, this kind of like physical forces shearing each other, or kind of interacting in that way. And time and memory have always been themes that I've played with, I think, like many artists. But with the notion that geologists talk about deep time, and that being this kind of time that's much more extensive, much grander and longer than your human lifespan, which I think that so much of us, if you're not in the geology world, then we're talking about things according to our own lifespans. I mean, that makes sense, building structures, all of these things. But then when you're on a precipice, let's say you're looking at this grand landscape, you're on a hilltop or something, and you look out beyond, and then you have this question of scale. You have this question of, what am I seeing? You're trying to be in the present moment, like we do, and you're taking in all these sensory elements, the weather, the wind, the sounds that you're hearing, the birds. And then you look and you realize that you're seeing you're seeing a present moment, and a present moment of what's in front of you, what you're perceiving, but you're also perceiving these flipped up rocks, these moments and these clues from so many, whatever, billions of years ago, that then have deformed. And so I started talking to geologists, and I'm a neophyte at this, so it's all kind of, it's all exciting. It's probably basic 101 geology, but for me, getting to talk to somebody who was almost on a different time scale, so they'll say, oh, I'm in an email dialogue with a geologist in Wyoming, because a lot of my subject matter had come from a residency in Wyoming for this body of work. And he'll talk to me about relatively new rock formations that are only 10 million years old, and that's when I'm on that's not new to me. Okay, so let me see things in a different kind of expansiveness. But what I have done in my paintings, and always kind of wanted to talk about, was the perception of time as a duration, right? So it's not like a ticking clock, but it's more like you're in your present moment, which is a singular moment, but it's not just like, you still can perceive duration. So your memory is a little part of that as well. So your present is never completely like this knife edge separating the past and the future. You're kind of arcing it, even in that singular present moment.
Right. That's really amazing. I once read this fascinating article about the notion of the present, and that if something happens in front of my eyes, the time it takes for my eye to process, my brain to process, that the thing already happened in the past. It's an infinitesimal slice of past present, but I'm already living in the past as it is, in the slightest sense. So I love that you say that, and I really feel like those elements of this, especially in the realm of paint and the application of paint, in the physical chemistry of paint, which I kind of also want to go into a whole thing on. but I'm not going to do that. I mean, I could, but yeah, boy, Mike Lamar says, this one is my favorite. It should be in a museum. It's gorgeous and really makes you think and gives you a deep connection to the earth, which you know, when you think about paint, right? And you think about the colors one typically would use in a landscape, where we're talking about umbers and ochres and greens and
Very neutral kind of palette. Yes.
Right. But there's a very sort of landscape palette. You can buy a kit of paint that is specifically for the landscape painter. But those paints tend to be much lighter in their chemical and heavy metal composition. You're moving towards a lot of what seem to be cobalts and cadmiums that tend to be much heavier in their mineral composition and sort of almost relate to that geological weight that you're talking about in the world. And so your colors defy the typical landscape, but the materials that make up those colors seem to live right in that landscape in a really cool kind of way, if that makes any sense. I don't know. I'm sometimes, ask David, sometimes I go way off on, I'm out on Pluto with my comments sometimes, but anyway, for what it's worth. So let's see. Yeah, David says so many favorites in this show. Carney Bryant says this one's giving me the Thomas Kolish vibes. Ooh.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Big fan of that.
All right, so let's see what we've got here. Let's keep going. Oh, I'm sorry. We were on, at that point, we were actually on, which one were we on? We were on Rift Rhythm, so I didn't keep you up to date on where I had forwarded to.
Okay.
So we weren't still on the previous one. My apologies.
We have lots of good feedback on, not feedback, but compliments on Rift Rhythm. People are absolutely loving it. So
yeah, and you know what? There's some questions for you, Michelle, that have flown by, and I don't want to forget them. So can we throw a couple of them in right now? Would that be okay?
Sure.
Okay,
yeah,
so one question is from Yaboy Mike Lamar. He says, question for Michelle, how did the landscape and topography of Wyoming influence far afield?
Okay, so that's a great question. It was really, I'd say this whole body of work in far field that you can see on the Brownstone Gallery website came from a time that I spent just before the pandemic at a residency program in Saratoga, Wyoming. So that's not too far from Laramie in the southern part. And it's kind of like a basin and range type area, and it has mostly these grassy hills and then these outcroppings of rocks, like we were talking about. So this like fluctuations of other time periods that you're witnessing. And that I did sketches there and did drawings that when I was in quarantine, I was just able to go back to those reference materials and look at, and then it would bring me back to a sensory place of being there, as well as this, this memory like we were all experiencing, where you have to go places in your mind more than physically, right? So it was great for me in Brooklyn to be going to this very expansive place in my mind of Wyoming. And I think also years past, about 4 or 5 years past, prior, I had gone to Iceland, and that trip had inspired a body of work. And so even though Wyoming is a different, not the volcanic kind of landscape, it still had this kind of expansiveness that I was working from.
Sure.
So
yeah, that makes total sense. I love the Iceland Wyoming combination. Actually, Mike Rader says stay on Pluto. I think that's a reference to my lunacy. Memory Vessel asks if she's curious to know. She's curious if you know Stanley Lewis paintings. Oh, Michelle's frozen.
If I know Stanley Lewis?
If you know Stanley Lewis paintings.
I do know the name, but it's been a while, so I'll look them up.
Okay. Let's see. I think that there was one other question here that said, how did the landscape... Oh, no, I read that one already. It was, do your friends help inspire your work? If so, in what ways? I have a feeling a friend might have asked this.
I definitely think I've got some friends asking questions, which is great.
Yeah.
Of course they do. They inspire my work. But, no, I do think that conversations of especially, when we're discussing this idea of landscape and time and memory, I think that conversations with friends accentuates that a little bit, because you're in this and I mean, with your own artwork, it is a sort of conversation with the materials as well. So the verbal is in your mind as well as these kind of physical interactions.
Definitely. We have Synchrony up right now, just so you know what we have on the screen. This is the one I was sort of going off on last week, I think it was, and I particularly love this painting. So, I was kind of talking about how this piece in the center, this object in the center, it's kind of like half mountain, half rock formation. Just kind of, Michelle talks about this notion of geologic time and slow time. This piece thrusts up out of the ground, and maybe if you can't quite get that it's in motion, because we don't necessarily think about a mountain in motion. I love this formation of that linear stroke, that brush stroke that wraps around the mountain, the couple of vertical elements in the sky. There's some things that just sort of hint at that sort of movement. But can you talk about this one a little bit? Because this one's, similar but different in that kind of movement.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, this one does have almost more of a swirling motion or something morphing before your eyes. And that does bring into this, if I'm really owning this idea of deep time and delving into it, then I kind of want to play with it and think, all right, well, what would it be if I could see deep time in almost my usual time frame, where you're seeing ghost images, but instead of on a time-lapse photograph or something like that, I'm almost seeing it all at once, or I'm envisioning maybe what was happening. Since nothing is really still, right? Even the solid mountain that we look at, that we're like, well, that's going to be there forever. It's like, oh, no. They're right. Some of them are on the way up, some of them are on the way down. It's, there's all this constant erosion. So it's this sort of exciting feeling that we're all sort of dancing around each other. So what am I really seeing, and what kind of dance is at play right now? And that's what this one is pushing more into, that movement and into how one thing is feeding into another. And the colors are pushed pretty extremely in this one too, in terms of the sort of intensity and fluorescence, so that nothing is really bucolic in the traditional sense of,
Yeah, it's almost like a difficult bucolic, right? It's like a bucolic that's really hard to swallow almost.
Yeah, we have some comments going on in the chat there.
Oh, okay.
Christina Mack says, this one, I can get lost in this. Love what's going on. Something so mystical about it. Gorgeous. And
Is it D. Simon 28?
D. Simon 28. Hi, Michelle. The show is beautiful. Question. Are we ready for another question?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Go for it. Okay. In the past, your colors were darker and more restrained, and a more restrained palette. What brought out the shift to almost apocalyptic, bright, and sharply contrasted colors?
Yeah, good question. And that's true, because my colors in the past were almost, there was a series in the recent past which was almost black and white and just shades of gray. So pulling, which I've done for the last 20 years of being an artist, where I will go fully achromatic and then go back into color. It's almost like I have to believe that the color is needed. So I go all the way extreme, pendulum, and then come back in. And I think for these, I wanted that sense of going back to that discussion of surprise, where when you get hit with some sort of sudden light or shift that you're aware of, it's all encompassing, which I felt like the intensity of some of these colors, these pink and chartreuse, and some of the ones that demand your attention. It's a little bit like it won't go into background noise, and also these colors don't behave as well as maybe the earth tones that you were speaking of before. where those will kind of recede, do what they're supposed to. And these are, you're not quite sure. They all want to come at you, so how to sort of organize the hierarchy of space with these was more of a challenge for me. So I enjoyed that.
Yeah, definitely. And Mike Rader says Bierstadt acid trip, which is just, that's brilliant. So, yeah. And also Carney Bryan asks, is there a particular place where you feel most creative?
That's a good question.
Okay. And is the question referring to location like
I think so.
I guess
like
a
particular look, like you were talking about Wyoming, you were talking about Iceland. I'm wondering if I think Brian wants to know if there's a particular place in the landscape or someplace like that. Yeah. I don't know why I can't get these words out.
I know the feeling. I think that wow. Well, so for right now, I mean, definitely Iceland and Wyoming were both so inspiring, and part of that for me is that being able to look at an expanded horizon. So I think more so than if I were to go to a dense forest or something, which would be beautiful in its own way, but for me that I think my imagination is kindled when I can look so far that beyond myself, I couldn't figure out a human scale. I like that perplexity, I think.
Gotcha. Well, we've got rovings up now, so we're going to kind of keep moving through because I want to give we've got a bunch to go through here, which I want to get some questions in too. So with rovings now, we completely shift gears, right? We're kind of now into a more, I won't say monochromatic palette, but mildly more monochromatic palette.
This was interesting to me because when we watched your one video, this was up on the wall at the same time that you were working on, I can't remember if it was rift rhythm or synchrony, but it was so different. And that's why when you said that you had multiple things going on, I was like looking at that, and then I was looking at that, I was like, wow, those are really different.
Yeah, and that kind of accentuates this notion that Michelle's able to keep a diverse, sort of simultaneous practice going.
Yep.
Thoughts on that?
Well, thank you for that. But also, I think that it's true. A lot of times I will have two ones that are seemingly different on the wall, and I might not make a move on one of them for months.
Yeah.
So then they can end up having this sort of different, kind of like a different voice.
Right.
And that helps me not take them to the same place, I think.
Yeah, this one really defies the landscape, I think, in a much sort of more mysterious kind of way. I mean, in the other ones, no matter where you went with color, no matter where you went with mark making, they always sort of had some kind of signifier in them that we're looking at a landscape. This one, though, we're really starting to get into a much more sort of nebulous, kind of unidentifiable space. So the mystery for me, kind of grows here.
Good. Yeah, and this one too, it felt finished in an unfinished way. Maybe because I had left more parts of the canvas white, and so I was, and there's always that time where you have to sit with it for a while and wonder, okay, is this finished? Is this finished enough for me? And for this one, it was risky in that way, but then I continue to look at a painting, and if it doesn't irritate me in some way, if there's not one part of it that's like I'm wrong, then I know, okay, it's done something different. Like I've gone to a different place with this one.
Yeah. Did you want to say something? I thought I heard you.
No, she actually answered my question. I was going to say, how do you know when your painting is finished?
Right.
So.
Right. I always find when I work, when I get to that, like the 60% mark. So, and I never know what percentage of done I am, but I get a certain distance into the work, and it grows in how much I dislike it. Right. And it just kind of continues to really irritate me. And then at some point around 60, 70%, I turn that corner. And I feel like when you work like this, you must experience that, I'm assuming.
Oh, absolutely. And there will be those times too, which I'm sure you can commiserate, where you feel like, okay, I think I'm about to turn a corner, but you turn it in the wrong direction. You just really go into a ditch,
Yeah.
and then you think, well, and the beauty of that part, though, it's painful as you're going down into the ditch, but then you've got nothing to lose after that.
Right.
And then you usually, I mean, I have so many paintings underneath these paintings. There's very many layers on these.
And you mentioned that in one of your videos. You talk about how even when you wipe away, even when you pull off the canvas or sand through something, that no matter how hard you try to obliterate what might have been wrong, it's always there and always kind of contributing to the future of that piece. And I think that has to be true of the landscape itself as well, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, going back to what you were saying before, it ends up, not that I was looking for an allegory or symbolism, but what's actually happening in the land on a material, on a natural level is, part of this process that I have in my work, this kind of layering or ghost image, or, the fact that the presence of all those layers that I've done in the past are still there informing the top layer, whether or not everything that was behind it.
Right. Gotcha. Carney Bryan is asking if there are any environmental factors that you feel are limiting to your creative process. Sculptore, thanks for the sub. And I'm glad you're here, by the way. It's good to see you. But are there any environmental factors that you feel are limiting to your creative process? That's an interesting question. And I'm curious about, and earlier Brian had said, when he asked a question, we were unsure of the direction. He said, interpret that however you want. So I'm going to speak for Brian here and assume that he means the same thing here.
Okay, so interpret any environmental factors that are limiting my process. Well, I mean, if my studio space was even bigger, I could work bigger, or larger, but I don't know if that's what he's asking.
Yeah, I would imagine that, this actually, he's helping me ask a question that I wanted to ask, and that has to do with this idea that, you talk about Wyoming, you talk about Iceland, you talk about the beginnings of some of these paintings because you go out and do drawings, and then you come back to the studio with this material that you kind of carry with you, and whether or not you begin in the studio or begin in the field, ultimately, I don't think these paintings are finished in the field, right? Mm-hmm. And so the notion of being outside in Iceland and painting a landscape to me is just, kind of mind-blowing on some level. And then you return to the studio and the vastness is gone. The geology is gone, right? And so that kind of functions like a geologic or an environmental limitation on some level, right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I like that interpretation of the question. I think that does inspire me more to take the experience out of the primary phase of the experience, let's say. And that way, because I like to let let's take the Iceland trip, for example. I'm seeing these landscapes that are blowing my mind that I've never seen anything quite like. I've never been in light that's quite like this. So even my sense of time was altered because of the space being altered. So all of that was something that needed to distill in my mind and work through the paintings and the drawings, because I think what happens is the direct responses from any sort of experience are interesting in their immediacy, but they don't have the complexity, for me in my work at least, they don't have the complexity of a finished piece, because I need that layer of time, and the time might be 2 years, and that's to have the psychological filter of what this experience was. It needs to kind of be translated into paint materials and not in a superficial way. So I have to get beyond, what did it look like? What are the colors of Iceland? What are all of these normal trappings that I would want to talk about at first, until it until it distills down into something more elemental. And it always takes me a while to get there.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, because now you're sort of taking what typically is a problem of fast time, right? So when you talk about like a plein air painter, right, who talks about the light and the special light, they want to get out there and they want to bang out a painting in an hour and a half because they don't want to lose the way the light hits something. But your psychological and emotional impact of that landscape on you and the work and the color choices requires that much time. Same
Right.
amount of time almost in some kind of weird scale down thing that the rocks in the mountain require to move, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's really cool. And Lachlan is cool. Thanks for the sub. That's awesome. We appreciate that.
Christina Ray Mack has a question.
Okay.
She's asking, was there a particular moment when you knew you were called to be an artist?
Oh, thank
and
God somebody
if
asked
so,
that.
can you share when it was?
Nice. I really always felt a kinship with drawing as a communication. And I think that's how it started when I was little. And my grandmother often tells this story where she was a real estate agent. And I would accompany her to open houses. And while she was showing the house, I would just be drawing and drawing and drawing. And it was kind of, I was also a shy kid, so it was a great way to sort of process what was around me and communicate with other people. So from there, I suppose most people are like this. You respond to the people responding to you, and I got encouraged from family and friends. Oh, those drawings are good. That you seem to you're going to be an artist, and then you think, well, maybe I'm going to be an artist. And so it kind of transpired from there.
Yeah, no, those are always good. Those are always good stories. I actually was going to ask you that, so I really am glad that Christina asked that. Let's see. Also, by the way, I've been cycling through a few paintings while we've been talking and asking these questions. So we're up to Trace Wave. We haven't jumped over a few. We've been showing them, but just wanted to let you know where we were at.
Okay, great.
So let's see. I want to keep going so that we, because I want to make sure that we stay on track here. So let's see. Oh, good. Let's talk a little bit about the wall that's hung with Leaving Wyoming, Chronicles, and Savant on it, those three. We have Leaving Wyoming up on the screen now, and you're working with the frame, you're working with the inverted panel. Where was some of the decision making coming from in these? Because these are really interesting to me.
Yeah, Leaving Wyoming is a real crazy one. That decision of I've been discussing with you chopping into the frame and the boundary and on the others it's a little more subtle. On that one it's almost more like an arrow pointing into the imagery area. And I think for that one I thought, why not? It almost seemed more like a symbol in the frame, and I wanted to see how extreme I could be for that part, and then even leave another boundary of unpainted area within, before I start painting in the colors and the imagery. And so that one's kind of makes me laugh. It's just sort of a good experiment in how extreme I could go with this kind of shaping of the frame. And then the other two, so all three of these are pretty chock full of surface detail as well. So I would say Leaving Wyoming has more of the contour extreme, and the other two have much more depth of surface detail and of sanding into it.
Gotcha.
Especially Chronicles.
Yeah,
Chronicles has these layers almost as though there were pages going within that. And that Chronicles goes back to something we were talking about earlier in that whole subversion of what would be solid ground, the typical foreground area, and it becoming this this massive swirl of who knows what. It's tumultuous, but it also seems not solid, you know.
Yeah, the way Chronicles rides up off the left side of the actual or panel, we should say, that just completely defies everything. It's like, there you go again with this kind of hint at what's going on landscape wise, but then this thing just rockets up off the side and kind of leaves us wondering, okay, what happened there? Like, where am I? You know, where does this space sort of begin to unfold? There's a lot of stuff going on in the comments I just want to throw out there to you. Penny Lane Jordy says, could you talk about the scale of your paintings? How big are these, and why do you decide on your sizes? So I think that's, especially since we just went from something large to something small, that, you know, seems to be a really valid question.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. Because also with the imagery that I'm dealing with, a lot of times I like to play with that sense of extreme scale. So for these three that we're talking about, it's almost a 1:2 kind of ratio. So these are 10.5 by 24.
Right. I think
there's a couple that are 11 by 22.
11 by 22. Yep.
Okay. And so it's sort of this it's a ratio that I like. So even on a small frame, it feels very expanded, like a wide screen. And that's seems to be a helpful format too if I'm talking about this sort of attenuated horizon, you know, that I'm then going to kind of mess around with.
Gotcha.
You know,
Really quickly, I hate username 67 says, is there any way to see close-ups of some of these? And there is. If you go to TheBrownstoneArt.com and click on the enter the gallery or enter the current exhibition, the images are far superior to what you're seeing here, and you'll be able to see them in your browser much better. So I encourage you to go see that. Christina McKinnon says, Chronicles is crashing down on us in the best way. You know, and then we get over to Savant and it turns vertical, right? And which I thought, you know, I kind of, as I'm going through all these landscapes, and then this one all of a sudden comes up, I got a kick out of that. And, you know, and just the play on the whole, you know, verticality, number one. But number two, this kind of weird edge, you know.
Well, I feel like there's a perception change in this one. Like what you were saying earlier, one of the pieces that you were looking at, you said it was more of like an aerial view. I believe it was sudden light. And when we look at this one, I almost feel like we're hovering over it and seeing different pieces. I love that flash of pink that just shoots your eye right up there. And you're kind of seeing all these little teases of color. But I feel like there's a little bit of a shift from where we're looking. But again, that's, you know, it's abstract. So
Yeah, no, and I actually kind of thought similar but different in that we were down below and looking up. And I felt like I was almost like looking through a space, right? So now the landscape is, you know, I'm like worm's eye view or look, you know. But I mean, regardless, I think that it being turned on its ear is what's interesting.
Yes.
Earlier, Sculptore1 said, I had a friend who always said, you learn more from your mistakes than from your successes. And I'm only bringing that up because it's about to pop off the screen and I wanted to make sure we said that. But I feel like the conversation we were having earlier, that was definitely really relevant in how we kind of go through this process, right, Michelle? I mean, I feel like you can.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that's why, you know, I think some of those, when we were talking about the layering too, some of those buried layers, they've informed the upper, you know, the top layers, because you've learned from them. You know, you're like, okay, this irritates me. When we were talking about that 60% there, and then you're completely irritated. You're learning from whatever you've done before, and you're responding to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's something about those layers and how, whether it came through sanding or whether it came through your color choice in Savant, especially, that weird activation of the edge, right? It doesn't sit dormant. It helps to sort of create the play on the blue, create the push-pull of where am I? Am I above, below, you know? And then that whole tectonic issue that we've talked about, it kind of creates a force, you know, like this sort of very subtle force that's pressing on that blue space, which I think is just really cool.
I love it. And I love that you both mentioned two different points of view, because
we do that a lot.
Yeah. We also don't
it's
talk
very
about,
good.
yeah, we do not talk about our, you know, observations on the artwork prior to the show too, because we like organic discussion.
We do our research totally separately. And we try to
Separately.
come to this in an organic way.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
for what it's worth.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
all right. So let's see. We now have on the screen Song for Bernard.
Yes.
So we're kind of shifting back now.
Okay. And this one too, for scale, this is probably a mid-size. So let's say Rift Rhythm and a few of the others that we've shown are more like larger scale, 6 feet wide kind of paintings. And then this one is more of like remind me of the dimensions of Song for Bernard. It's like a
Song for Bernard is
24 by 46.
24 by 46.
Okay. Yeah. So, this one, I feel like I titled it Song for Bernard because in Bernard's paintings, which I love, there's always a slow reveal. So you're looking and you're noticing the colors of the tabletop or, whatever kind of interesting composition there is. And then all of a sudden you'll notice there's a child in the curtain or there's because Bernard does these colors that are all so vibrant and kind of fighting for primary space, then things pop out at you eventually as you're the viewer is rewarded by taking time with it. And in this painting I felt like there was this interweaving of these vibrant colors that reminded me of what I owe to Bernard, I think.
Gotcha. Texas Rhythm says, Grandma sends her love. She is proud of your work and happy she was part of your early art. I love that. I love that.
Thanks, Grandma.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And Grandma's 99, by the way.
Oh,
Wow.
my
Oh,
goodness,
that's awesome.
Fantastic.
Congratulations. That's beautiful. So, all right, let's see. We also have, okay, this one, we got to talk about this one.
So we have Light Tectonic on the screen right now.
This one's crazy.
This one is crazy.
I know.
And
I agree. That's one of those ones where, and even in deciding should this one be part of this same body of work, I mean, there were several that I had to kind of question myself as to whether or not do I present these to Josh as like this body of work, does it fit? And it does, because it's talking about these same kind of surprise of the landscape, the rising and the falling, and this sense of pockets of time or portals of one thing happening in another, where you feel like, okay, I'm seeing multiple weather patterns happening at once. This can't just be one moment. I must be seeing multiple moments, or a duration of time. But yeah, this one is also one where I feel like it's extreme and it's less articulated with the edges than, let's say, Rift Rhythm.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out how to have those pockets of time or those transitions without using the same language. So sometimes I'm using these edges that bleed into one another, and sometimes they just kind of fade in. And this one's has more soft edges, more fades that still are jarring because they're different colors, or there's something else that jars you out of a sort of ease.
Well, yeah, I would say that one thing that jars me out of the ease is like, so Michelle, if we were in the studio together and you said to me, I'm thinking about making a painting where I use like a hexad color scheme, like 6 vibrant, equidistant colors, separated from each other on the color wheel, I'd be like, no. Do not do that. You can't do that. You can't. The power is too great. But you nailed it. Like you've held it together here. And I think those soft transitions that are present there were kind of necessary to help dampen the blow that kind of comes with this much. And I think it's brilliant, right? I like the way the space recedes on the right towards that darker blue area there. So you do give us that kind of landscape-esque kind of depth, but then you push us back on the left side at the same time, which is just fantastic. Mr. Kwame says, "Hi, Michelle. Song for Bernard made me tear up. Love the whole collection. The sense of uncertainty over how far away from things we might be is really moving to me. Also, I'm curious if any science fiction novels or movies had an influence in your work here."
Good, very good question. Hi, Kwame. Yes, I think that there is a sense of it's interesting because I used to pull years back for the black and white work. I pulled from film noir a lot, which made sense for these kind of shadowy spaces, the way that they would elongate the filming, because of these cast shadows and extreme angles. And I would say for this, there's not a specific kind of science fiction like novel or show, but a little bit of living in the pandemic kind of felt like all of those, like Oryx and Crake or some of the Margaret Atwood more science fiction novels that I had read, that I felt, okay, there's tinges of that in a very real way, and that we're in right now. So I think that came into some of this color scheme too.
Yeah, that's a very good. I love that answer. Hello 29292929, who I believe is your cousin Erica, says, "Congratulations, Michelle. I love you. You are seriously awesome."
Thank you, Erica. Yep. I appreciate that. I'm getting a lot of love. I appreciate all of this.
There's so much to read here, Michelle. It's blowing my mind. Amanda Toulon says, "Such skillful use of color. It's so impressive how you create such depth in this palette. Do you surround yourself with reference images that you take or ever collage?"
Oh, I have done collage, but a lot of times the reference materials for these paintings are almost more desaturated than anything, because it's sort of like what we were talking about before with extracting or distancing myself from the primary sources more and more, so the psychological and other complexities can kind of layer up in the distillation. I don't want the print to be too good. Any of my references, I don't want them to be too chromatic, too finished. It's almost like when I was in Wyoming, I only had a black and white printer. So a lot of the photos that I took came out in black and white. And for actually the first probably 6 months, I was only working with gray images and just kind of pulling from memory for the colors. But then after that, I started working from colors, but from color prints. And when I do collage, they're separate finished pieces themselves. They're more like, I have one on the wall right here.
Ooh, we're going to get to see one.
Studio, let's see.
Oh, yeah. Oh, look at that.
Very cool.
Wait. Hold that up. I'm going to switch screens here. Hold on a second. There we go.
The big screen.
Oh, yeah. Look at that.
That's fantastic.
They almost look like, is that piece?
There's a lot of depth in there, too.
Yeah. And that piece on the left, is that acrylic, like peeled up off the palette?
Here?
Yeah.
It was an image of paint that was peeled up off the palette.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
Good call.
That's really beautiful.
And this was a painting of a structure that was on my rooftop. So it's all kind of Brooklyn based. So all of these collages were much more of the urban, the odd combinations you would see in urban New York.
Yeah, that little show and tell right there just lit the chat up. Everybody's like, "Whoa, wow, that's gorgeous." You're getting somebody said, "Oh, hello." Your cousin Erica says bidding starts at $1 million. Dang,
this is great.
I'm gonna have to sit this one out. Rice Maker 69, thanks for the sub. I really appreciate that. That's fantastic. All right, so we now have. Hold on, I got to go back to my screen with. Whoa, look at all those things that just came flying in there.
Yeah.
That's not supposed to happen.
I
That's a
think
lot
the
of
whole
words.
show popped up.
Yeah,
There we go.
we have Shadow Ray on the screen right now, actually. So,
Okay.
This is the last piece in the show. This is the last piece you encounter when you're going through the Brownstone Arts show. did I see, and forgive me for not being really prepared on this question, was there a mention of the use of vinyl in the work?
Oh, yes, but vinyl paint. So it's an acrylic paint, but it's called, the brand I use is Flash Paint.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Yeah. So I like that one because it's matte, and I can add some sort of polymer, some sort of medium to give it sheen if I want to, but I like the matteness of it. So that's the vinyl, but no like no stickers or anything like that on there.
Because there's a really interesting sense in the work where some of the sharper edged lines form in the division of these spaces, almost as if there was a masking of sorts that was helping to push some of that apart or to hold it apart.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I do use masking in the process.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right on there.
Well, I don't mean good, I'm happy I'm right. I mean good, I was wondering if I was seeing something optically that was or was not happening. And so I'm pleased that I was reading it correctly. So
Yeah, you are. That's another way that I can create those edges of different time pockets, we'll call them.
Right.
So that I can kind of block out certain areas and literally work on them at different times, but also create those edges. My thinking about the boundaries, even those outer frames, are also the boundaries of the shape within. So you'll notice in some of these, and especially if you can get closer to them, there's bleeding, that whole idea of the solidity of things being more permeable. So even the edges of these objects or forms, I want some parts of them to kind of seep or bleed or blur, and that masking helps with that because I can kind of control that a little bit more.
Well, and what's really funny about this too, when we talk about masking and we talk about the frame and we talk about you defying these spaces, is geology doesn't really care about boundaries, right?
Right.
So in some senses, you're also sort of mimicking that play between those two things, which is really kind of cool. Thanks for the cheer bits. Thank you. Who is that? Ricemaker69. That's awesome. Thank you. Couple more comments here. What do we have here? Let's look.
There's a question here by Penny Lane Jordy.
Penny Lane Jordy.
Is there a spiritual aspect to your work? If so, would you care to share about it?
Yes. Yeah, there's a spiritual aspect. I think that, I guess I was speaking to this a little bit before, where I do feel like there's this sense of scale, when you're confronted with a landscape, and a sense of, okay, you confront those questions of, vastness, right?
Yeah.
Is there a God? Is there all these things? And I believe in one, so I'm able to kind of respond with that sense of awe and sort of like feel like I can learn from what I'm seeing, because I do feel like from that belief, I feel like there's a sense of purpose. So it's not just this futile kind of thing.
Well, there's also a sense of, you all of a sudden have an awareness of your own scale, whether it's in the scale of time or whether it's in the scale of size. You now are made aware of your smallness, or your temporality, becomes very evident. Ricemaker69 did say, Michelle, been a fan since your New York days. Love your work. So that's there. Let's see. Memory Vessel had mentioned that she loves the negative space. Let's see if there's anything else that we missed on here. So if you guys have any other questions that you want to ask Michelle, this is the last slide in the show. So let's throw them out there now if you want to. We have time for just a couple more. Do you have anything you want to throw in there? I see you digging. You're digging in your notes.
Well, I'm just looking through some of the questions that I wrote down, but they're kind of like all over the place. One thing that we keep talking about or seeing is the palette and the color choices. And one thing I noticed one of the videos is that you were kind of placing these little color splotches together in a beautiful sketchbook. And I almost wish we could see that sketchbook to see how you
Here it comes. Here it comes.
Ooh! Ooh.
I can find that for you.
Yeah, that's those tests, those color test studies that you were doing. Those are beautiful.
They are gorgeous.
Let's see. Let me see if I can find that.
This is why we like having artists in the studio, because it's like you never know what's gonna happen.
Yeah, well, it's like her paintings. You never know what's right around the corner.
Yeah, here they come. Here they come.
This is not the one you were talking about, but this is, a
Yeah.
sample page.
I love that. Yeah, that's great.
So then
Yes.
I'll make notes to myself of like, okay, well, yeah, this combination. I'm going to use this. I'm going to start with this on one painting, So I'll kind of, I'll do that. Let's see if I can find. I know that there was a particular kind of a more elaborate one.
Yeah, there was one that had a lot of samples in it. No
Yes.
no pressure,
No
Michelle. We don't want to
pressure.
put you on the spot here. It's okay if you can't find it. But I mean, I would are those videos available online? Can we find those?
Now I think maybe Taylor had posted those through the website,
Okay.
on the gallery website, but I'll have to.
If they are, we could also add a link to those in the YouTube recorded version of this, so I could put those in tomorrow, so that anybody who wants to come back and revisit could go and actually see them. You actually would be able to see Michelle's color tests in her sketchbook in one of these videos, and they're really quite beautiful and worth having a look for sure.
Well, we can get those to you for sure.
Oh, good. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, David. Negative space in the collage is what Memory Vessel was referring to before. I'd like Wait, hold on.
I'd like.
I'd like to see a collage show next.
Yes.
That could be. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
that'd be
good idea.
cool.
You've sparked the next show.
Yes.
So, well, are there any other questions out there? I want to make sure I don't miss anybody. Have a chance to put that in. We'll give those a couple of minutes to pop up. Michelle.
Now, maybe we could talk about to purchase.
Yeah, actually, okay, that's really a good point. Do you want to bring that up, or do you want me to say that?
Go ahead. Well, to purchase any pieces in the show, because majority of them are available. 2 have sold already, but you can just contact the Brownstone Arts and inquire about the prices.
Yeah, if you're curious about purchasing these, I mean, these would be lovely additions to your collection. I really feel like these are amazing, and I know earlier Erica said the bidding started at $1 million on the collage, but my guess is that they could be acquired for less than that. So, no offense, Michelle. I mean, they're worth every penny.
Yes.
Oh no, that's good.
So, it looks like everybody has got a lot of praise. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. It says, when starting to paint your next album?
Yeah, last question.
Last question. When starting to paint your next album, how do you find your inspiration? Do you already envision your next set?
Oh, so I think like on my website, I have them separated out in bodies of work. So maybe that's being referred to as an album.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe series
Yeah.
is the better.
And I know a lot of times it's almost like, it looks kind of like, wow, okay, this body of work went together. Did you have that idea, that concept as a whole? And no, not really. It usually comes together kind of like titles for the pieces. Once they're finished and I'm reflecting on them, then I notice there's this thematic continuity that I didn't know when I was in the throes of it. And also sometimes, when we were talking about my working on multiple pieces at once, some of those pieces, even if I was working on them at the same time, go into a separate body of work, or they just weren't finished or something. So it's not just that during a certain time there might be a thematic continuity with 60% of the work, and the other ones are outliers and they don't fit in.
Right. So it's kind of like you kind of do it as you go. You kind of feel how they move together as you go.
That's right.
All right. So David Backus just wanted to say thanks to Michelle for allowing us to show this amazing body of work. $1 million is a starting point.
Going once.
Going once. Let's see. DNF Hello says, what a wonderful show. Great work. Dave Schmidt, fun show tonight. Pumpkin Audrey says, thank you. Really enjoyed meeting Michelle. We really enjoyed talking to you tonight, Michelle. This was really, really fantastic. Thank you so much for the opportunity to step into your studio and to see your work. This was a delight.
Thank you. I mean, the feeling, I'm honored, first of all, to have been shown at the Brownstone Gallery. So I want to thank David and Josh and Taylor. And I want to thank you both for this. This has been a blast of a conversation, and you're both such thoughtful viewers, and it's a wonderful program. I love the birthdays. I love the whole setup.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Well, we are going to say goodbye and pop over to our other screen, but make sure to get over to the Brownstone Art on their website and check out Michelle Mackey's show. You've only just begun here. The images look so much better on their website, so you got to go over there and see it for sure. Michelle, thanks again.
Thank y'all.
All right.
Good night.
Take care.
Good night.
All right, everyone. Well, listen, if you liked that, if you enjoyed that, we've got another live in the studio artist next week on May the 4th. Appropriately enough, we're going to be having Mike Rader, Potato Head. He's in the comments occasionally. He might still be there right now. But we're going to be featuring him in the studio next week for May the 4th, which is Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. I always feel like I have a list, but I say that.
Yes, that's the whole thing.
Please don't forget to come see us. People, thank you so much for all the follows, all the subs, the cheer bits.
All
You
the
have been
love.
an absolutely fantastic audience. We loved bringing you this content tonight. We look forward to seeing you again in the future. And please join us again. You know, this has been a lively chat. It's been really fun meeting all of you. This was a delight.
This was.
So special thanks to David Backus and the whole crew at the Brownstone Art for allowing us again to host another one of their shows. We're honored as always. And special thanks to Michelle Mackey for this. This was just a wonderful, wonderful time. And we need...
I'm almost out.
I'm toasting with water.
And with water.
My bottle almost matches your scarf.
Ay, ay, ay. Okay.
Anyway, thanks everybody. Have a great night.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I'm not drinking this.